Welcome.
And we're live.
Look at you producing the
we're,
show.
we're getting into the wonderful world of visual media and audio, visual and audio media. Howdy, Joe. How you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. How about you?
I'm doing pretty good. So we're moving along in the season, and the semester's wrapping up at YSU in the coming months. We're very excited, my classmates and I, for the presentations April 28th at the Mogg Library, 5th floor. There's a special archives exhibit space. So the projects we're working on in applied history through the Steel Museum, there's going to be an exhibit up there. And then on May 6th at the Steel Museum, there will be a grand presentation of the three main exhibits that we're working on, which, of course, our theme of the show, my master's project, Mahoning Movement. There's that. There's the Brown Bunnell project for around the Cavelli Center, and this East End here downtown. It's based on the Mackey map from 1899, and it shows a specific section of this East End of downtown. So we're covering specifically what's on that. So that's the second project. And the third is Congregation Ohev Beth Shalom up on Wick Park on the north side, an exhibit on the history of that congregation, how various congregations have merged together over the years to form that. It was Rodef Shalom, now it's Ohev Beth. So that's an exhibit as well. Those three exhibits will be launched then.
So you're a busy dude. Like, tell me how you get put on this trajectory. Like, is this just you're following your interests, or like, how'd you get on this boat?
Well, going back to why I shoot, like, so obviously been doing the business for the past 13 years, which that's something else that we should talk about some point. August 5th this summer, celebrating 10 years of having the building.
Beautiful.
13 years of the Lemon Grove and of the Martini Brothers. I don't know if we really talked about that, but the trajectory of Lemon Grove's 13 years ago downtown. Meanwhile, Martini Brothers out at the Golf Dome in Girard, also along the Mahoning River, also will be along the trail. They started a business restaurant there. And then here we are together as of 2013. And so we're celebrating like 9 years together, but
That's
10 years of
crazy.
having the building. So that's August 5th. So anyway, so that's what I've been mainly doing these past 13 years downtown. But then just this past 2 years ago was when I started going back to YSU to get my master's. And initially, I kind of just thought of it as a piece of paper, but because of like the quality programs and faculty up at YSU, it's actually been really helpful. And it's very unfortunate that a lot of that is being cut currently. And, YSU is losing Dr. Jacob Lebens, and they're actually cutting the American Studies program. They're cutting Northeast Ohio MFA. So that's something else we've talked about on the show is the anger involving that. But
Right.
we're going to
We'll
keep it
you off
positive
that-
today.
We're keeping you off that trail.
Yeah. We were talking about just before starting the show today about keeping it positive today. So, let's talk about businesses along the trail, because talking about that, you as an entrepreneur know, about going into the world of small business. It's often without a safety net, and it consumes your entire life. And it's small businesses, and I think no matter what your political stripes, you can agree small businesses are the backbone of the country.
For sure.
So that's what's cool about these trails is it's going to be great for the economies along them, and for the whole region. So let's talk about. So should we start east to west, or west or north, south to north?
Well, first, and this is a question that comes up on a regular basis, where the idea of having these trails be sort of like as an economic engine for small cities, especially that are across, they're along the trails. But where does that come from? Where's the data and the modeling? Because I'm a little bit of a cynic when you think like you put infrastructure in, and then people are just going to start traversing them and bring all
Rails
this
to
there.
Trails does really great work showing the numbers.
Okay.
And of course, they have their own bias. That's
Right.
the name of the organization.
For
but
sure.
no, they're also legit too. Like
Are they taking like big economies like New York City or Chicago and using that data, or like are they?
I think they gathered data from along all the trails. And
Okay.
I know, speaking for Missouri, not that I can speak for Missouri, but going through Missouri this past year on the Katy Trail, that was an interesting kind of case study for me, because it's one trail that all at once was an abandoned rail line that boomed in like I think 1983 or something. They made it into a trail from being an abandoned railroad to a trail. And so I think there's a lot of clear-cut economic data that shows how helpful it's been for the economies along it. And the state of Missouri itself, which is also a pretty conservative state overall. I mean, I think tends to lean red for the most part. Besides, of course, the major cities of Kansas City and like St. Louis, which are strong blue. But overall, the state's pretty red, and it's a bipartisan consensus. Like, this has been great for the economy of Missouri. This trail alone saved countless towns along the rail or along the original rail line, because there would have been nothing there. And that's something I'm trying to really cover in my project is having a balance with the interstate. So much of our American life is automobile centric and evolves around the interstate, and how many towns have been cut out of that. Take, for instance, one of my favorite towns nearby, Ravenna, Ohio. Route 76 goes south of it, but how many people have, I mean, how oftentimes the people go right past it to Akron, whereas originally these transportation networks would take you right through the center of town. It doesn't matter if it's the canal or the railway or original roads before the interstate. It would take you right into the heart of town. You'd see the small businesses, and you would, but now you just zoom right on south of it on 76 and go from Starbucks to Starbucks or whatever. So
Right.
it's
Now, and I'd like to see like who's using these systems and like what their profile is. So when we travel in the motorhome, like
Mhm.
we almost exclusively would go do our grocery shopping, go to the beach by getting parked in the town, and then using the trails to be able to get to the beach and get to the shopping
Nice.
districts
Yeah.
and whatever, because the roads were just terrible to try to get around on a big motorhome
Oh, I
for
bet.
that.
Yeah.
And it was just so much faster to be able to do that.
Uh-huh.
But like around here, when I ride a bike trail, I'm going from point A to B more for exercise and to get out there. I'm not really shopping or stopping at places when I'm passing through for sure.
Mhm.
But like when I'm traveling, I actually on purpose go to shop. You know what I
Mhm.
mean?
Well, so that's what's interesting is how many different kinds of people are using the trail for what purposes. So you'll have some people that are traveling and they are going to be wanting to stop. I know firsthand from taking those kind of trips. Like when you see a business nearby the trail, you stop because you don't know
For
if there's not going
sure.
to be one for another 20 miles. So you have those people. You have local residents that, whether because they don't have a car or because they rather take multiple modes of transportation, that are using the trail for local transportation. And if you have a grocery store by one in the trail and you have saddlebags, you load up on your way home.
That's
So
right.
that's another method of uh, economic development. And to me, that's most important is communities, especially ones that are underserved by current transportation methods, whether because lower economics, you don't have a car, or because you literally have a freeway cutting through your neighborhood, but you don't have actually access to it, whether because you don't have a car or because you literally don't have an on ramp there, and so that's an issue too. So finding these ways to connect those communities both to each other and to places where you could shop, that's an important aspect of it as well.
Yeah, I'd really like to see a community that built up around the being connected, because I can picture if you had like a little housing development,
Mhm.
and then on the trail not too far away would be some kind of shopping district, and to see if if you set up a bunch of like rental bikes, if they would use that as a throwaway to be able to
Yeah,
get to their
which there
grocery
is
store.
a rental bike company coming to Youngstown. I think they're coming out
Really?
with a couple docks. Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, so that's happening. Well, I think a great case study is how beautiful Cleveland with Tremont and the trail is, and that's a great case study of it. So you have the Ohio Erie Canal towpath that takes you from Akron up to Cleveland. It used to just kind of stop south of Cleveland some, but now they have the towpath extension, which goes through. It's a major shopping center called the Steel Yards, and it was always kind of considered a failure, but I think it's doing a lot better now. And I don't know how much the trail contributes to that, but I think it is a great resource for people being able to stop there and then ride up the trail just a little further north is Tremont, which has always been a really cool neighborhood. There's some fantastic places like the Literary Cafe up there and a really great coffee shop slash record store, which is called Loop. That's right there. But now that you have the towpath that connects to it, you could do your shopping at the big box stores if you have to there, get on the trail, go to your neighborhood and eat at Barrio Taco in the neighborhood, or Michael Simon did have a restaurant there, but I think it's something else now. So I think that's another case study of how shopping centers uh, can, so much of the shopping, the modern shopping center infrastructures, you can only access it by cars. I mean, how awful Boardman is for people on foot or on bike,
Oh yeah.
and some people depend on that, to get around it as transportation. And I try to avoid taking the car as much as possible anyways, and there's times that I've done 224 and nearly, gotten hit numerous
Not
times.
great. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's getting worse out there too in like Austin town. And and something else that's on my nerves, this new thing. building stores backwards from the road. And I heard people complain about the new Chick-fil-A they're building, which I boycott them anyways. But the new Chick-fil-A they're building out in Austintown, it's facing away from the road, and it's meant to. Their reason is it like streamlines the drive-through somehow for them, but it's you're looking at the back of the building. The same thing at this new Starbucks in Boardman, and also back in Austintown, like right across the street from that Chick-fil-A. There's another new plaza, which is like T-Mobile, like I think a Pulp Juice, which I like the Pulp Juice, but and there's a jewelry store, and that's another plaza that's facing opposite of the road. And it looks, I can't imagine it's good for their business, but it's such an awful form of architecture. And it just shows like when you're prioritizing automobile centric methods rather than people walking, people biking, people. I mean, I think it's just a worse way of living. I think it's just awful, but also it's cuts people out of the economy. It endangers people when you're trying to actually my grade school basketball coach was killed on 224 in Boardman crossing the street. It's a dangerous place to be on foot, or on bike, and so that's just not good for building
I have
community.
a crazy question for you.
Oh, yeah.
You up for a crazy one?
Sure.
Okay. So within the next decade, we're all inserted into the simulation anyhow,
Oh,
where you don't have to do
if we're
the
not already
physical
in there.
world. Oh.
Yeah. Ah.
So you can customize whatever storefronts and
Mhm.
outdoors and your neighborhood looks like and whatever.
Mhm.
So if given the choice, if you are early adopter to be entered into the simulation where you don't have to look at the backside of a Chick-fil-A,
Mhm.
do you take the option?
Well, that's why I live in the city, that's why I like being in Youngstown. I wouldn't wanna live out there.
Okay.
So, uh,
Simulation, yay or nay?
I think it's potential we're already in it. If
Okay.
we're I don't think we're ever gonna be plugged into it. I think if we're in it, we're already in it.
Okay, so
But
what
maybe.
about a simulation within the simulation? If you
Oh,
get to enter the new simulation, do you take it?
no.
No, you're out.
No, I like the real world. And I always worry about authoritarian control. Who's controlling this simulation, whether it's a private corporation or if it's the government or whatever. I don't. I That's what we have to worry most about, who's controlling the simulation, right?
Oh yeah, as a
You know,
libertarian, I don't trust that at all.
yeah. Now, what happens if it is open source or freeware? I trust democratic methods over any other kind of controlled system. You know.
To a point. To a
Well,
point.
yeah, to a point. I don't wanna enter in the simulation at all, shit. But if I have to. But yeah, to me, that's what it always boils down to
But
is
if
Democrat.
if they, sort of like the real world and culture gets to a point where you just can't hack it. It's not pretty, it's not fun. It's guided for someone who's not you. Like if they built the whole society around someone who wasn't you, and
Yeah,
you're just kind of like, you can check out and go get the customized world that's more like you.
well, which we have so much of that already with our technology around it, and how escapist it can be. And I mean, it's always been that way with like with TVs and whatnot. It's so much of it's escapist. Whereas I think it's important to have a balance. I mean, art is important, but I think art at its most important isn't necessarily escapist. It tells us truths about reality as it is, and I think the same thing is true with digital technology or whatever. And that's why I appreciate like doing the map work too. It's a digital. Actually, it's kind of like one of the points of the whole project is merging a digital reality with actual reality. And so you have the map aspects, which can be used in multiple ways. They can be augmentations for the trail, like augmented reality. So imagine you're down by the Cavelli Center, going along the trail, and you hold up your phone, and you're looking at through it as a portal, and you see the steel mills there, and you see the smoke go off. And I'm kind of sick of whistles, so we don't necessarily need that. But you have like a visual representation, the mill, and you're learning about it. So it's augmentation. Two, if you can't be on the trail itself, whether it's because you're across the world or because you're in the hospital or whatever, that you'll be able to experience the trail through this device. Uh, and so that's one of the aspects of it too, is like kind of merging that actual world with the digital world in a way that's productive and not just escapist. That also can be escapist too, but you're still experiencing a real world. I think what's most interesting about where the technology could go with it, whereas being necessarily living in a complete fantasy world. Although there's some weird stuff happening with all that too. Like, I guess if I have a friend who owns a skyscraper, but not in the real world, but in the virtual world, but it's kind of like a big deal that he owns a skyscraper or whatever.
Mhm.
Like, I don't know. I don't.
Eventually, because we'll inhabit that, and they'll be early on real estate investors.
Yeah,
That's it.
but I still don't want to live in that world. I don't even, actually a big influence on me was playing SimCity growing up, but of course I always use the cheat codes to have unlimited money to build whatever I wanted.
No fun.
I did. I don't have the patience to sit through that. I want a football stadium here right now. But I don't have the patience to play that, or especially The Sims anymore. Like I barely want to control my own life, let alone a digital avatars.
A whiny social butterfly person.
It's
Yeah, not for me.
yeah.
But the Sim City, those were the best. All those sim games were
Yeah,
awesome.
2000. It was kind of like the leap that Grand Theft Auto made too. The first one, it's a little too, but then it made that huge leap, and
Oh,
now of a
heck
sudden,
yeah.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Which I don't know what they're doing with those nowadays, but
Games have changed, and it's more about like the social interactions than you versus you or you versus an algorithm. So like I've noticed like I don't even like really playing games anymore because you got to involve other people. It's not like you can go do your thing and just win the game.
I tried a little bit of the online 2K experience a couple years ago, and I felt good for a while that had a winning streak and stuff, but it just stressed me out too
Yeah.
much. Like, well, one, because you have the technology itself, at times there's a lag, and so that drives me crazy. That's something that drives me crazy about technology in general. Is like you don't know if it's you messing up or there's a problem with the device itself. And actually, one of my map professors wasn't much reassuring with that. He's like, "Oh, yeah, you never know with that ArcGIS. It just well, that's not reassuring, but there's inherent glitches in it, so that's frustrating. But then at the same time, too, it's like what's on you to evolve, and what is the system that's holding you back?
Yeah. I got another question. I'm hitting you with Crazyville today.
Well, might as well. Let's chat
Yeah.
about anything. Yeah.
So Starlink, the satellite internet
Which
company.
I don't I'm me, I'm not a big fan of Elon Musk, but props to him for at least giving Ukraine some equipment. That I guess he shipped some Starlink.
Yeah, like
Have you heard about that?
5,000 little boxes
Yeah.
that got
So
them internet.
I mean,
So
at least he's doing his part. It kind of annoys me that everyone can just change their profile picture or put the blue and yellow light bulbs on their building, but people actually are making sacrifices, including if that means paying at the pump that with gas prices. Like people should. But here's the other thing about with Ukraine and everything that people need to realize that war is bad for everyone around the world, and that you know you're seeing a hospital being struck, by Russia, and saying how awful that is. Absolutely, but also realize that the United States did the same thing in Afghanistan and Iraq for unjust wars. So it's realize that war is bad everywhere, and oppose all forms of war that affect the general people. If Putin and Trump would have bashed it out, let them do it on themselves, but that real war, hurts the people, and it doesn't matter how bad the country is; it's the people who suffer, including Russians. I don't want to see Russians killed, but I want Ukraine to win the war and push them back. But you don't want to see Russian soldiers die either, because they ain't there. They aren't the ones benefiting from Putin's thirst for land and the oligarchs and whatnot.
So the Starlink satellites, the reason I really like this whole concept and the whole technology is because you have rural or you have middle of the desert, you have these remote places that don't have the population densities to justify fiber optics. So they get technologically disconnected from, what a government would even run infrastructure wise.
Mhm.
And so, but this opens up that those places get connected because you just have to have an open sky and you can be in the ocean or in the desert or whatever and have internet.
Mhm.
Now, because of the way the network is, it's sort of got it can't support an infinite amount of people on it. It's a very
Hmm.
limited subscription base because you have one satellite that's covering like 3 states, if you
Mm.
think about it that way, and it just maybe can handle 100,000 people at a time. Well, a
Mhm.
lot of the subscribers are coming from, my internet's slow rather than I don't have internet at all. So you can see a lot of the subscriber base is going to get gobbled up with people who do have other options, but this one happens to be a little bit better. And you
Mhm.
think some of those more remote places are not going to be affected like I had hoped, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Because it's going to be the whole technology is going to be consumed by, regular people.
Mhm.
So
I one of the complaints I heard about the system though is it interferes with uh astronomers, that I guess they're flash and you can see them actually flash around. I haven't seen them. I've
yeah,
seen the space station before, but I've never seen the Starlink
Well,
satellites. But
there's a model that shows how many with are in an area. Like,
mhm,
and you can take the same map and see how many airplanes are in that same area, and
mm,
like there's one satellite to like 100 airplanes. So
mm,
it's already your sky is your night sky is already goofed up with stuff. There's not
mhm,
enough of them in the that orbit to really disturb it. But I can see a flashing sky, or something that's going low, but it's out of the frame so fast
mm,
that
hmm. So you're saying the technology is inherently limited to only support so many people. You think that there'd be at some point a way around that? Like, how do you can you do different coding to have more
well, I think it
data
depends
going
on
through?
the number of data stations that are uploading to a certain area. So
Mhm.
let's just say you have a ground station that's pumping the internet to the deal, and
So
there's
you
only
need ground state? I thought each device itself
no.
links. Oh, I didn't realize that.
So the ground stations beam up the internet, and then they talk to one another through laser. So
Oh,
yeah, the more
so you
ground
still kind
station,
of need like cell towers type
exactly.
thing. That's not so much better than
Yeah, I mean it's good that you
if
can
it's a
take
plate.
a Cleveland ground station could be feeding internet for anywhere on the rest of the
Uh-huh.
constellation, but still you're only limited X amount of per
Yeah,
ground
and
station.
who would want that in you already have fiber optics in Cleveland, but like you said, the completely remote place, yeah, I think
Are
it's
loving that. Yeah, and the
yeah, that's
latency's real bad. Is that, like you're talking about playing video games.
uh-huh,
This is like 100 millisecond latency, which if you're playing a
mm.
player versus player, that's not great.
So, yeah, I think the technology is best used to give people who don't have access. Because I think that the internet should be considered a universal right at this point, that we need to make sure that people have access to the internet around the world, that should be a shared global mission, whatnot. Which I don't know if you want to get into that whole discussion,
Sure, why not?
but that's something I struggle with if we're going to have confessions of an anarcho-Marxist.
Okay,
How do you resolve wanting to have you need to have global standards and they need enforced, but at the same time being wary of any kind of government, makes me kind of wary of the United Nations, especially when countries like the United States and Russia have so much power on it, even though that they've had some of the most notorious global infractions. So how do you enforce international standards without having global government? And what's the practical solution to that?
man, that's a rough one because I'm gonna actually point to like pharmaceuticals as the model, and I don't usually put them up as some place to emulate, but if you take my biggest fear about making a utility out of internet is
Mhm.
that there's already a whole lot more innovation ahead of us that has to be done. There's got to be a lot of profit incentive to be able to innovate into the next technologies, and I think what we should do is give whoever innovates and creates the technology a period of time where they can claw back some of their investment dollars, and then once they've made that back, well, so let's just say set it up as an 8-year exclusivity where it's almost patentable. And
You
then
don't think the internet already has reached that stage, though,
no, not at all.
in terms of the infrastructure of it all?
Yeah, it's not there yet. I'm telling you, there's
Huh.
so much more to go.
Well, there's always more. I guess it's a good analogy to the whole trail and the road type thing. So, at what point does the road having a road like whether it's 224 in Boardman or whatever? At what point is the shared community, the public, whether through government, to establish like, okay, no one's going to own this road. It's not going to be a toll road. You're
Right.
going to pay taxes or whatever, but it's worth it for the people to make that investment in that road because you have all these businesses around here that are paying sales tax, property tax, and
Right.
whatnot. So to me, the internet needs to become that road. We won't abolish, private businesses, but let's at least have the road that's accessible to everyone. And to me, that's where the internet should be already, but you're saying it needs to evolve more
Well, a
before it needs to.
portion of it, there has to be a portion of it that's sort of like the bleeding edge portion that's not practical yet, but needs people to keep playing with it so that we can get quantum computers in there and some of the higher end stuff, the higher communication stuff. And then below that, it needs to be like that road because there's some utility to it where it's just really important that we connect all people to at least the simplest version of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
You need both though.
interesting. Yeah, well, have what we have now, make that, but there's still,
Well, what
look.
I mean, look at what with the DSL companies and the cable companies. They were able to run a bunch of infrastructure to different cities
Mhm.
with the blessing that they get exclusivity. Nobody else can
They've
sell a
made a lot
product
of
in
money.
there, right? And so that went terrible for innovation and pricing because basically there was no reason to keep innovating because there was no competition to force it. And so they got to just sit on these people who were stuck in their service areas. Now it's beautiful that they got service there because of it, but it's not so beautiful that they had no competition for it.
Especially with cable, if you let every company run cable wire to compete, then you're having crisscross wires everywhere. And I think the early days of like electric was kind of like that too. You'd have individual electric companies. So that's where it becomes a utility. And that's where I think it should be publicly controlled.
Yeah, but with more than one method to get to the internet, where you have cellular, you have satellite, you have fiber optic, and you have coaxial. Now you can have different players that don't have to be string cable there. You can reach you virtually without having to run infrastructure to you.
Yeah. Well, is fiber optics the most is there something be more cutting edge than fiber optics?
For sure. Yeah.
Oh, wait,
We're getting close to quantum computers at this point. And so I don't know what that's going to be
I
like.
know quantum computers, but in terms of them communicating with each other, isn't fiber optics still the best way?
Not in this iteration. Like for now, it's yes, absolutely. It's the best how we want to connect, our universities to other universities, or governments to other universities.
So what happens if we just said, forget the whole cable companies thing? Let's have fiber optics and let's link the communities together.
Super expensive. That's why it's not running to all communities. There's places in like Girard and Warren that are on copper because they couldn't get fiber optic. There wasn't enough people there.
There is supposed to be a new Eastgate Regional Council government's broadband plan. I know
I heard something. Yeah. I didn't see the details on
it. I got to see some of like the meeting on it. I don't really follow that much, overall the broadband aspect, even though I am very much into technology. But I listened to the whole presentation. But I guess the nuts and bolts of it is along Route 11. They're gonna install broadband cable. But I'm just curious, like who doesn't have access to it now that I think they have it up in Ashtabula already, but is it mainly just for the rural communities along it, like Jefferson and whatnot?
Those missing areas between population centers.
So this is, as a libertarian, do you think it's good that the government is making the investment into that?
Short term, as long as it has a sunset on these things, I don't mind if they prod along and try to get something.
Are you saying they should privatize the broadband?
No, not permanently. I just I think that if they need to give incentive for development or some movement to happen, that they nudge it along. But I want private to solve the problem.
Huh. What happens if counties can solve it better than private entities?
Well, that's a rough one because I've never seen it in practice where, like for instance, if a community shops a company and contracts it like a, garbage company, then I can see that because you have the hybrid between what private would do and what public would do.
Take fire stations. Fire departments were originally completely privatized, but you would have firefighters showing up fighting each other to see, you ever see Gangs of New York? Oh, it's worth seeing. Yeah. Okay. But you would have firefighters showing up fighting each other out to see who would put out the, fire to then collect the money so that was something that was completely privatized. And then society realized like, hey, maybe this is something that we'd be better off actually having as an extension of government and actually have organized. And so, I mean, yeah, fire stations, that's one.
Yeah. And so that's why I hesitated, because in some applications that is, the total way to do it. I just want to kind of see it play out and slow walk it rather than, because the more things we give government to do, I shudder just because there's not a whole lot that they do right with what they're already managing. To give them something else just scares me.
Yeah. Well, it scares me for actually managing it. Can the bureaucracy manage it? But also it scares me in terms of power. What power do they make? But to me, the ideal, I think we talked about on the show before, the ideal is that it's simply government at its best is only an organization that carries out the public, what needs to be done together as a public. It's that can't be done any other way, and I think healthcare should be included with that.
The decision making can't be objective. It's all political. And that's why I'm saying, like, it's not the public part that scares me. It's the political agenda where if you said that you gave power to turn off, half of a county that votes blue, and somebody has that ability and it helps them politically, like, I wouldn't put it beyond them to give themselves a political advantage using the powers.
The gerrymandering of maps.
Right. Yeah. Sure. So that's why, less trust is, from my standpoint.
I agree. But I still think things like utilities, and you need to have public ownership. We'll use that word, public ownership. The problem is then obviously government is the way that public ownership is expressed, which then becomes problematic. But at the
Right.
end of the day, it needs to be publicly owned, something like a utility, I believe. And I think education should be in that basket. I think healthcare should be in that basket. I think transportation should be in that basket. And that's what a lot of people disagree on, that it should be. But I think those are things that you need to have public ownership of, because it's something that enables those things being rights. I think that all humans have a right to those things, not just Americans, but all humans have a right to that. So how do we make that happen? And especially because we have the means as a civilization to make that happen. This country especially is wealthy enough to make it happen, but we don't. We let extreme wealth of the capitalist class run off with it all.
Yeah, and every time this discussion happens, I get super excited because it all situates and makes me excited. Like we end up sending all of our tax dollars to the federal level, and then it trickles back down to our deal, and it's never in the doses that we send it out there with. Where if communities would keep more of their own money and own some of their own schools and own some, with this gift from the federal gods, it disconnects people from the investments in their own communities.
Hmm. Yeah.
I think I would care a whole lot if my tax dollars went right out from my mailbox right to my local district and did made a.
Well, you probably pay property taxes, right?
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, that's, to me, that's especially like that's a direct investment, and I think more should be done on the county level. I really
Yeah.
do.
And it could
And
be done more effectively. That's why I think half of the incompetence that comes from the government's oversight over it is that they're just too big and there's too many things to look over. They just don't see it because they're flush with cash and they spend it indiscriminately.
yeah, well, at least on the federal level,
Yeah, for
and I think,
sure.
well, that's the defense budget's way too much, in terms of like where's the federal government putting its money. If you look at the defense budget compared to any other country and compared to the rest of the things this country invests in, it's a ridiculous chunk of the pie. You know, but
Yeah, so I'm with you. I think local ownership. We should take a little bit more responsibility for our local stuff and quit sending so much to the federal government. Because I'm with you. Like we agree that these should be managed from a public interest,
mm,
right? We just disagree that I don't trust any of the public interest to actually do a good job. Because my number one priority is everything just has to be done well. Like I don't really
mm,
care who's doing it. It just has to be done really well. And then you can only watch so many federal programs, fall on, it collapse on itself
mhm,
and be run improperly to know that this is just another one that's going to be a boondoggle that you and your community could do a much better job. Even if you're terrible at
mhm.
it, if I gave you that same money that we gave to the federal government, you could do a much better job.
Sure. Well, I feel that same way about a lot of things here in the city as well, where we give a $400,000 contract for some St. Louis consulting firm to tell us something. Whereas, this is something Derek McDowell and I have like talked about before. Like, give us $2,000 and we can make a whole bunch of shit
For
happen.
sure.
But you spend this ridiculous amount of money for
I'll Google it for
outside.
$100. I mean,
Yeah,
that's what.
exactly. Yeah, but yeah, I'm with you. But yeah, that's something we should talk more about, because and it relates back to the whole bike trail project too, is you see the difference between counties. It's bike trails, especially like when you hit that county line and well, between Summit County and Portage County. They both do a great job, both those counties with bike trails. But there is a difference, right? The county line, the trails don't exactly align, but it's because they're funded within on a county basis. And so I think we have a lot of catching up to do in the Mahoning County, although we've done a pretty good job, especially with the Western Reserve Greenway. But now we need to go the other way too. We need to go
Right.
east-west. That's the whole point of this project. And then Trumbull County, they also, with the Western Reserve Greenway, have done a good job. They're putting in the missing piece of that. And also the Parks Department is working on this section of the East Gate Regional Council government's proposed Mahoning River Greenway. So it might actually really happen, but it's up to the counties to really do that. And I think they should receive federal support as well. But yeah, you got to have good people on the ground in the counties carrying it out. And I know there's a few good people around here that are working on it.
And I'm telling you, like when I was younger, I can remember county commissioners being a big thing. They were always in the news. They were always tackling big things. And then they went irrelevant for a while.
Mm.
I didn't, I never knew their names. I didn't know who my local commissioner was. And now again, you see commissioners starting to take center stage. So I'm wondering if that's already happening.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, they have so much more power than they even yield. Yeah, something I find really interesting is that you can establish a county bank. That could be huge. Why don't we have a county bank?
Let's do it. You and I.
Yeah, yeah. Let's become commissioners and do it. That'd be interesting. Yeah, county commissioners. That's here's something that's really upsetting as well. There hasn't been an African American elected on a county-wide office in Mahoning County. Ain't that crazy? Like, so, and it's the direction of the county as a whole. It's it's becoming more of a red county. I know some people like that. I tend to be
Right.
more on the blue side of things, but it's I mean, there's some troubling aspects to the direction the counties might go in with that.
This was a very different talk we had today. This is great. I
Yeah.
like this
Well,
one.
you know us, we
That's it.
traverse the universe. Yeah.
Cool.
Thanks,
man.
Joe.
Thank you for listening to this show on Youngstown Studio. If you like our programming, we invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow our Facebook page, or subscribe to your favorite podcast platform like iTunes or Spotify. This is original Youngstown content, and we would appreciate you sharing the videos and the word about us.